2 days ago, I woke up feeling really groggy to the point where I felt almost drunk and like dizzy, just groggy essentially. So I decided to do a breath meditation, a deep breathing meditation, because I wanted to have some sort of spiritual experience to just kind of get rid of the grogginess, I guess. I'm not sure. But the point is, I meditated for about 45 minutes, and this is the first time I did this in a long time, and I just did some really deep, slow breathing. And I realized I had a bit of anxiety in my chest and in my throat, and it wasn't really going away. And even after the 45-minute meditation, the anxiety in my throat and my chest, it was still there and it didn't go away. Now, back in the day when I was really into meditation and really into practicing presence, I could make any kind of anxious feeling just kind of dissolve almost instantly. If not, I could meditate and it would go away. So the meditation didn't help. So I decided to just kind of go about my day, and I was a bit disappointed that I had to, carry this feeling with me throughout the day and that I couldn't get rid of it. And around 4 p.m., I decided to meditate again. This time I did transcendental meditation, which is probably the first meditation I learned. And I did that, and it still didn't help the anxious feeling in my chest and in my throat go away. Now, what I realized is the anxiety wasn't being caused by a thought. It wasn't like a emotional reaction to something going on in my head. It's purely just there, and it wasn't going away. Almost an hour and a half total of meditation throughout that day, and nothing really helped, and it was still there, just as strong, just as obvious, just as annoying. Around 8 p.m. I decided to go to the beach, because I was kind of like, well, if I'm feeling anxious, I might as well be out in nature and go to the beach, because it feels better to do that than to just like sit around at home on your phone or something. So I went to the beach, I sat down under this tree, and there was a nice little rock, but I sat down and I felt like this was a nice spot, so I just kind of settled down there, and I suddenly started to listen. I just kind of sat, I stared at the water, I was looking around, and I started to listen to the sounds around me. I was at a cove, and there were people there, and there was noises happening. There was cars driving by, there was people making noise, birds. And I started to listen to all of this, the general hum of life being lived in the present moment. And I became aware of how subtle some of these noises are that we don't even notice. And so I heard something off in the distance, maybe a crow, just really far away, but I could hear it. It was just barely perceptible. It was so subtle. And then there was probably birds over here, just very subtle and very far away. But I tried to listen to the most unintrusive noises, the most subtle, and take in the experience as a whole of sound. Just experience it all. And what I realized by focusing or trying to hear the most subtle noises, the most subtle sounds, you become aware of the stillness underneath those sounds, because the stillness and the silence is the most subtle. It's more subtle than any noise you can hear, because it's imperceptible really to your five senses. So I continued listening, just enjoying the moment, and I noticed I was becoming very present and very still. And the more I listened, the more I would go deeper and deeper into the present moment. Like I was kind of emerging out of my mind and really becoming present. It's an amazing feeling, really. So I kept doing this for a little bit, and next thing I noticed, the anxiety in my throat and my chest was completely gone. Like it was never there. There was no sign of it ever being there. It was just gone. I was like, oh, nice, cool. But I didn't even really care at that point, because I was so present and was feeling so good that it didn't even matter. I was like, so be it. Now at this point, I went for a drive. I got in my car, and I wanted to keep listening. I wanted to keep that practice going of just listening and becoming more and more present, going deeper into the present moment. So I rolled down my windows. I didn't put any music on. I just kind of had full access to the outside world within my car. I was driving really slow. I was listening. Both sides. There's sounds coming in. And I could hear birds in the woods. Some were close, some were further away. Some were deep in the forest. But I could hear them as I passed by. And they would fade as I passed by. Every noise that I heard would fade into silence as I passed by. So I'd follow every sound I heard until it faded out into nothing. And when it faded to nothing, all that was left was silence and stillness. I was like, oh. Just like a Buddhist bell, like one of those, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Ding! Those things. That's what it was like. That's the kind of meditation I was doing. But in everyday life. Like, your world. Kind of cool. But I kept doing this. I passed by a lawnmower. It doesn't matter what sound it is. I passed by a lawnmower and followed the sound until it faded into nothing, into silence. And then essentially I kept doing this until this feeling of like bliss took me over. This feeling of being so aligned with life, so utterly aware that you actually feel high. Like your eyes become stoned. They become like red, puffy, and you start to laugh because you're actually becoming like high on life. I know that's kind of cringy, but that's actually what's happening. Your chemistry is changing in your body and you're becoming awake. Your senses are being enhanced because you're becoming more and more aware. As I went deeper into the present moment, my senses became so alert. Everything I touched felt more real. Everything I saw was more vibrant. Everything I heard was clear. It had a clarity to it. So I was no longer thinking, but the thoughts that came to me were kind of like profound and thoughts that I never had before. And so I kept driving. At this point I got onto the highway and I was looking at all the trees and I realized, wow, everything is alive. It's so beautiful. And suddenly my consciousness, my awareness kind of expanded out beyond me, beyond this body. And it expanded and I realized that I am a part of everything and everything is a part of me. And that realization is the realization of oneness that a lot of spiritual teachings teach, is that realization of oneness with everything. And I felt this before, but it was very intense and I almost didn't understand the feeling until that point of experiencing true oneness with everything. And a few moments later, I brought my awareness back to my body and laughed out loud when I looked at my hands. I looked at my body because I realized this is not who I am, but I think this is all I am, is my body. I'm not just my body. And I laughed. I thought it was funny that I've been thinking that all I am is my body, but I'm everything and everything is within me. And this is why it sounds crazy to someone who, first of all, maybe hasn't looked into spiritual teachings, but mostly because they haven't experienced it. And even if you understand spiritual teachings, you study them, you still might not understand it. Well, you won't until you've experienced it. The sun was pretty much setting at this point, and it was really bright orange in the sky. And I looked at it, and I pretty much started crying of just like joy and how beautiful it was. It really kind of hit me in a different way. You know, sometimes we look at the sunset, we look at beauty in our world, and we see, wow, that's nice, that's beautiful. You label it as beautiful. But the experience of true beauty is a lot different than labeling something as beautiful or just saying that is nice or that is beautiful. When you experience a sunset or you experience anything really, and you recognize its beauty fully, it grabs you by the core of your being and kind of rattles you. It shakes you up. And that feeling, that kind of liberation, makes you cry because it's so beautiful. It makes you cry of joy. And it's very difficult to describe. I'm sure you've experienced it. It's just a feeling of awe, of beauty, of recognition of life. And so I looked at the sunset as if I almost never seen one in my life before. And it felt like a very childlike feeling. Like, wow. You know, like you're just amazed. And I laughed out loud a few more times at a couple different things, you know. I laughed at the fact that it's a miracle that we're even here on Earth and that we can experience such a beautiful sunset. I also laughed out loud at the fact that when I was driving, I realized how fragile life is. We drive like 100 kilometers an hour on the highway, you know, feeling like we're invincible, And really, life is just so fragile, and we don't realize it. It's a subconscious program that just kind of runs itself. You don't need to be aware while you're driving, but becoming aware while you're driving makes you realize how fragile life is, because, you know, one thing could jump out at you and you twist, and that's it. That's your life. You're gone. And things like that happen all the time, and we don't realize how fragile life really is. And I realized it when I was driving. And so this feeling of like absolute bliss and stillness, heightened awareness is a good way to put it. It hasn't really left me. It's diminished somewhat, but the heightened awareness and the feeling of peace has not left me since that experience. And it's probably been a day or two since then. But I noticed that night I slept like a baby, perfect sleep cycles. The next morning I woke up, not a thought in my mind. I just woke up in peace. I went for a walk around my house and outside, and I just realized like everything was so fresh. It felt so new to me. It's like I was perceiving things differently, almost as if I was looking at the world for the first time. And that's a great feeling to have when you wake up. And there's a sense of distance between who I am and my mind, and it's almost constant. Like, it used to be that I had my thoughts right up here and they were almost like I was in them. And now it feels like my thoughts, my mind is a bit further out. Like there's a bigger gap between who I really am and my ego or my mind, whatever you want to call it. And so that's been consistent since that experience, and it feels good. There's a lot of space, there's a lot of freedom. Now, the stony eyes that I was talking about, you see a lot of spiritual gurus have like kind of like high eyes. They look stoned because they kind of are, because they're just high on the present moment, high on life or something. But your chemistry does change, and I did have the stony eyes during that experience and a little bit after. It sort of faded, but it comes back when I go deeper into the present moment, and I feel like I'm able to go really deep whenever I want to now. It's an overall very pleasant experience, and if you want to see more of my spiritual experiences, some of them are like this, some of them aren't. I would say this is probably the most profound one that I've had. You can go check them out. I'll link them down below or up in the cards. That's pretty much the entire awakening story that I had, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like on this video, comment down below if you have any questions or maybe some explanations of what I just experienced. I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.